Revenge with Karen.
The day Austin muted me in front of 200 people, I didn't scream, cry, or slam my laptop shut like some Netflix dramatization. I just stared at my own reflection in the black Zoom screen and thought, 16 years for this. 16 years of carrying a company on my damn back, while men with louder voices and thinner resumes strutted around like they invented electricity. I wasn't the star. I was the one who made sure the stars didn't burn the damn building down. When I joined Blackridge Consulting, the company was 6 months from collapse. The founder, Paul Blake, had charisma leaking from every pore and a talent for catching whales. But process, organization, anything resembling sustainable structure. That man ran a multimillion-dollar consultancy with nothing but charm, a whiteboard, and 2 interns with panic attacks. He was allergic to email, preferred handshakes to contracts. One time he signed a retainer on a cocktail napkin, which I had to retrieve from his golf pants after his wife threw them in the wash. And yet, we worked, because I made it work. I was the fix-it girl, the quiet operator, the walking reset button. When the Lathrop account went sideways in 2011, I was the one who flew out on Christmas Eve to repair it. When Paul forgot to renew our insurance policy, yes, forgot, wrote the submission packet myself, faked his signature, and sent it off 5 minutes before the grace period ended. No one ever knew. No one ever had to. That was my magic trick. Keep the chaos quiet, keep the lights on. I knew every password, every NDA, every pressure point in the building, and I don't mean HVAC. Clients asked for me by name. Directors ran presentations by me before risking them in front of a room. At one point, our biggest client, Feldmore Holdings, called Paul and said, "We're renewing for another year, assuming she's still there." Paul just laughed and told them, "She runs the place more than I do." I used to think he meant that as a compliment. By year 10, I had rewritten every onboarding protocol, restructured compliance into something that could survive a federal audit, and created 2 backup systems that not even the tech team knew existed. One was digital. The other was me. Here's the funny part. I never wanted to be the star. I never wanted credit. I just wanted peace, competence. A company that didn't treat every day like a game of Jenga played during an earthquake. I liked fixing things. I liked being the one person everyone trusted when everything else was on fire. And they did trust me. For 16 years, I built a reputation brick by brick, not with flair or ego, but with results. Quiet power. Until the boy king arrived. But before we get there, before the muting, the clause, the boardroom, I need to ask you something. Just a small favor. If you're listening to this and haven't hit the subscribe button yet, please do. It really helps more than you think. Keeps the stories flowing, the coffee brewing, and the petty vengeance hot. Also, don't forget to tap that like button, because apparently algorithms need validation too. Anyway, where was I? Oh, right. The warning signs. Paul announced his retirement. There was a moment, just one flicker, where I thought, maybe he'll make the smart choice. Maybe he'll name a real successor. Groom someone from within. Let the people who actually built the company keep building it. But no. Instead, he walked into the Monday meeting wearing boat shoes and a Jimmy Buffett grin and said, "I'm heading to Sarasota and my boy's taking over." His boy, Austin Blake, 32, MBA from somewhere fancy, 6'1" of buzzwords and beard oil. A man who said things like synergize pipelines and thought Slack emojis counted as leadership. First week on the job, he wore sunglasses to the executive briefing and said, "Let's disrupt the old DNA." I thought he was joking. He wasn't. By the time he fired our longest-standing vendor because he didn't vibe with the aesthetic, I knew we were dealing with a legacy hire on a mission to ruin. He didn't understand the business. Care to? He believed he was born for the role, like kings and their divine rights. Every meeting turned into a TED Talk knockoff with Austin at center stage, whiteboarding nonsense, assigning blame, changing timelines with the attention span of a toddler in a toy aisle. I watched him walk into the server room once, point at the cooling unit, and ask, "Can we make this more client-facing?" The consultants called it Austin Drift. Your project scope changed 3 times before lunch because the CEO read a Medium post about agile chaos. I tried. Lord knows I tried. Gently, then firmly. I sent reports, quiet warnings, risk assessments. I even drafted a full 90-day stabilization plan and walked it into his office. He skimmed it like it was a Yelp review and said, "This is a bit heavy, don't you think? We should be moving faster, not overthinking." Overthinking. It's what he called protecting the company. That was when I knew the old ways were dying, that my silence had a shelf life, and somewhere deep in the archive of legal folders and trust documents was a clause, a quiet one, written in a different time with different fears. Paul had asked me to help structure it, said it was just a parachute in case the kid's not ready. Back then, I thought we'd never need it. Back then, I still believed in heirs. I swear on my favorite coffee mug. First week Austin walked into Blackridge. It was like watching a golden retriever try to run a tax audit. All enthusiasm, zero sense. He didn't even bother to learn people's names, just assigned everyone Slack nicknames like the Fixer, Brand Guru, and King of Ops. I was Legacy Core, which is rich, considering I built the damn core. On day 2, he held a culture reinvention summit in the lobby, moved the ficus, installed a smoothie bar no one asked, and started every morning with what he called stand-up sprints, 15 minutes of shouting aspirational garbage like, "Be the chaos you want to see in the world." The man thought productivity meant having an idea every 7 seconds, no matter how dumb, and the rest of us chasing those ideas like ducks in a hailstorm. Then came the bloodletting. By the end of his first week, he'd fired 3 of our most experienced contractors. Said their vibe was off. That's the word he used, vibe. These were people who had handled our most delicate compliance rollouts, saved our ass with SEC documentation, and had years of institutional memory. Gone. Replaced with college buddies who listed growth hacking and energy wizard on their resumes. I watched him bulldoze our vendor network like it was a video game level. Axed the IT firm that had built our infrastructure from scratch. Said they were legacy bloat. Hired a startup from Miami that promised cloud-based disruption with emotional resonance. Within a week, the VPN failed, the onboarding system locked everyone out, and the printer started printing Bible verses in Korean. When I tried to intervene, gently, diplomatically, he smiled like I was offering him a knitting pattern. "I appreciate your passion," he said, doing that slow nod men do when they're already dismissing you, "but we're building a new rhythm here. Less old world, more frontier spirit." Frontier spirit. Like that justified throwing out compliance protocols because they weren't fun to read. He replaced our quarterly reporting templates with Canva graphics and suggested we use Instagram polls for client feedback. During one client pitch, he opened with a TikTok of a bear doing yoga and said, "This is our energy." I swear to you, I looked around that room and half expected Rod Serling to step out with a cigar. It wasn't just the decisions, it was the tone. Meetings became theater. Every conversation was a performance. People started quoting him like a guru. Austin says momentum is more important than direction. Austin believes structure kills innovation. One of the interns printed that last one on a t-shirt. He brought in his childhood friend, Theo, as director of strategic integration, man whose last job was branding consultant for a tequila company that went bankrupt after a lizard bit their CEO on camera. Theo walked into the office barefoot one day and said shoes repress creativity. When I emailed Austin about it, he replied, "Let's not stifle personal expression." Meanwhile, deadlines slipped, clients bailed, and no one seemed to care. At one point, our biggest retainer client sent a formal notice of concern. I flagged it to Austin, color-coded with escalation recommendations. He sent back an emoji, person in lotus position. I started saving emails. Every weird decision, every ignored warning, every reckless directive, I logged it all. Not because I had a plan yet, but because I knew the storm was coming. I've lived through enough C-suites to know what rot smells like. And this wasn't just rot, it was accelerant. And he was flicking matches with both hands. The board noticed, of course, weren't blind. But Austin was Paul's son, and Paul had promised a generational transition, which meant the directors were all performing a polite waiting game, hoping the kid would either wise up or burn out before they had to take sides. I saw it in their eyes during calls. The tight smiles, the cleared throats, the way they ignored him misquoting revenue numbers and inventing acronyms mid-slide. And me, I kept working, kept stabilizing, kept rewriting decks at 2 a.m. to make sure they didn't include phrases like financial vibes. I tried, for as long as I could, to make him look better than he deserved. Because at some twisted level, I thought maybe that's what Paul would have wanted. Maybe Austin would find his footing. Maybe this was just immature arrogance, not terminal incompetence. Then came the Thursday meeting. Austin looked at the team and said, "We don't need compliance to succeed. We need confidence." And something in me cracked. It wasn't loud. Just a small shift like a door closing, quiet, permanent. I opened an old folder that night, one I hadn't touched in years. Inside were notes, memos, a scanned document with Paul's signature, and 3 little words written in legalese that might as well have said break glass in case of idiot. Clause 14. I wasn't ready to use it, not yet, but the matches were piling up. And Austin, he was still flicking them. Breaking point didn't come with a bang. It came with an oops. The kind of oops that cost you a 7-figure client and 27 months of trust. It was the Grenshaw account. A quiet whale, the kind that doesn't make a lot of noise, but pays their invoices on time and expects you to do your damn job. We'd courted them for years. Paul himself had flown to Boston twice to wine and dine the CFO. By the time they signed, he had custom infrastructure in place just to meet their metrics. For 4 years, they barely spoke, just sent in quarterly KPIs and expected delivery. And we did, because we respected them, because we understood them. Austin didn't. He thought quiet meant bored, thought he could spice up the relationship, invited their exec team to an immersive branding experience in Santa Monica that included a candle-making workshop and a fire dancer. Yes, a fire dancer. Doors? Then he sent them a reimagined billing tier, without a conversation, without legal, without sense. It upped their cost by 18% and included transformational synergy mapping, a thing that exists only in his imagination and PowerPoint. Grenshaw pulled the plug in under 48 hours. No warning, no phone call, just a formal disengagement notice and a polite suggestion to recalibrate internal oversight. Translation: you clowns don't know what you're doing, and we're not paying to watch the circus. The fallout was nuclear. Half the team scrambled to figure out how it happened. The other half pretended it didn't. Austin, he held a transparency sink where he blamed misalignment with outdated processes and said the real issue was a lack of operational boldness. I was sitting 3 seats down when he said it, watched his jaw flex as he leaned back like some kind of self-help guru on a book tour. That afternoon, the board scheduled a closed-door session. No Austin, just the usual suspects, partners, VPs, me out of obligation. They were polite, but the air had shifted, tighter, like everyone had collectively realized they were sitting in a room with a ticking engine and the mechanic had just quit. The chairman asked for a postmortem. I gave one. Clean, factual, sparing slides, timelines, documentation. The moment I mentioned the unauthorized pricing restructure, 2 directors exchanged looks. But no one said it. No one wanted to say it. Not yet. Later that week, in a leadership meeting, Austin tried to reassert control. He stood in front of a wall of graphs that he didn't understand and declared, the problem is we're too slow, too process-focused. We've got to stop worshiping the compliance gods. He looked directly at me. You know, maybe if some of us spent less time documenting and more time doing, we wouldn't lose momentum. It was one of those moments where the entire room tilts sideways and you have to decide whether to stand up or stay quiet. I stayed quiet, because rage is a luxury and mine had deadlines. I smiled, nodded, and that night I started printing. Not just emails, not just reports, everything. Reopened the Clause 14 folder, reviewed the founding documents, triple-checked the escrow structure. The founder had written it with paranoid precision. If the CEO exhibited patterned financial recklessness or willful negligence, voting rights could be temporarily reassigned pending internal review. A stretch maybe, but we were sprinting toward the edge. There was a trigger mechanism, too. It required a named compliance officer to invoke it. That name was mine. Back then, Paul had said, just in case he ever gets too big for his sneakers. You're the adult in the room. I had laughed, thought it was overkill. Thought Austin would grow into the role. Thought surely we'd never need it. But now, the man had cost us our biggest account and called it momentum. If that wasn't too big for his sneakers, I didn't know what was. I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in 5 years, a legal contact who'd helped with the initial structuring. Met a diner halfway between our cities. I ordered black coffee. She ordered silence. Then I slid the documents across the booth. She read them, page by page, didn't blink. When she finally looked up, she said, "You're still in?" I nodded. "Then it's executable, not without blowback, but it'll hold." We didn't talk long. She gave me a list, steps, phrases, documentation required. She warned me this would get ugly before it got clean, that Austin wouldn't go quietly, that the board would need cover. Paper trails, witnesses, momentum of a different kind. I said nothing, because inside me something was already shifting. Not anger, not revenge, just clarity. The kind that comes when a storm stops being hypothetical. I walked back to my car, opened my laptop, and started logging every detail with timestamps, backups, and notarized summaries. Not because I wanted to destroy him, because I knew he'd already destroyed himself. I just had to prove it. The all-hands meeting started late, as usual. Austin insisted on waiting until his energy was aligned, which apparently meant standing barefoot on his balcony with a turmeric latte until the ocean answered back. Meanwhile, 200 staff members stared at their muted Zoom screens, fidgeting, checking email, silently begging for an early lunch. And then, finally, he appeared. Shirt slightly unbuttoned, hair styled like he fell asleep in a marketing shoot. Behind him, some abstract canvas that probably cost more than my Honda. He opened with a video of a dolphin giving birth, yes, a dolphin, and said it symbolized our rebirth. I swear on every audit I've ever filed, that actually happened. Then he launched into a 12-slide deck about quarterly resilience metrics, most of which he invented on the fly, claimed we'd outpaced expectations by 37%, that client churn was at an all-time low, and that our Grenshaw disengagement was a mutual alignment pivot. I waited, held my breath through his monologue. He skipped charts, misquoted earnings, and forgot half the org chart, including a department we no longer had. Then he said something that broke me. And thanks to our dynamic leadership realignment, our operational costs are down 22% since March. That was a lie. A bald, stupid, checkable lie. I clicked the unmute button. Austin, sorry, but that's not accurate. The Q2 audit showed an increase in operating expenses. Specifically due to the vendor transitions and legal retainer adjustments, click. He muted me, mid-sentence, in front of everyone. Then he smiled, that smug, toothpaste commercial grin. Shut up and be grateful for this position. He said it like a punchline, like we were doing a roast. His friends on the call laughed, high-pitched, performative, bootlicker laughs. The kind of sound you hear at happy hour when someone tips 8% and says, money's just energy. The rest of the room, silent, not frozen, paralyzed. I could see some of them blinking. I could see one intern, lower left corner, visibly mouth the word Jesus. I sat there, mouse still in hand, screen frozen on his smirk. 16 years, I thought. 16 years of crisis triage, of flying out during snowstorms to fix his father's deals, of rewriting policy manuals by candlelight after server outages. 16 years of protecting a company from itself. And this is where I land, on mute, with a command. I didn't cry, didn't scream. I just logged off and sat in the dark for exactly 3 minutes. Then I reached for my phone. Contact was still saved under Clause 14 Trust Council. I hadn't touched it in years. Never needed to. I dialed. She picked up on the second ring. Her voice was cool, sharp. Yes, I said, it's time. A pause, then Clause 14, per the founder's signature. Another pause, longer this time, a flicker of tension. You're sure? Yes. Then I'll initiate the sequence. You'll get the affidavit within the hour. Start gathering your exhibits. I already have them. I hung up. No shaking hands. No second thoughts. Just silence, deep and pure, like the quiet you hear after a building implodes. It's a strange thing, watching a fuse burn after so many years of trying to keep the matches hidden. I sat back down at my desk, opened the folder I'd titled Contingency Blackridge, dragged a copy to a flash drive, air-gapped it. Then opened the HR records and started tagging timestamps. Because here's the truth about escalation. It doesn't begin with rage. It begins with clarity, and I'd never seen things so clearly. It was 6 years ago. Paul had just come back from a vision retreat in Sedona, tan as hell and twice as paranoid. Something had rattled him, a talk with his estate attorney, a near miss with a tax audit, maybe just a nightmare involving Austin turning the firm into a startup-themed podcast. Whatever it was, he called me into his office, shut the blinds, and poured 2 whiskeys. It was 11:40 a.m. He didn't even start with small talk, just looked me dead in the eye and said, if I get hit by a bus or lose my mind, this company doesn't belong to a slogan. Then he slid the folder across the table. Inside, a preliminary draft of an emergency clause structured through a dormant escrow system buried beneath a silent partner trust. Legal jargon wrapped around legal jargon, like a Russian nesting doll of worst-case scenarios. Clause 14, he said, it's not going in the main operating agreement, not public, not notarized through usual channels. This stays in the deep files. I read it 3 times before I spoke. You're transferring temporary voting control to a compliance trigger? Under what conditions? He leaned back, sipped his drink. If my son ever takes over and acts recklessly, if the company's exposed to legal or fiduciary risk, if key clients start running for the hills, you'll know it when you see it. I raised an eyebrow. So you want me to be the trigger? I trust you more than any blood of God, he said. You don't chase clout, you chase accuracy. You know where the guardrails are, and you don't flinch when the car swerves. I remember laughing, half joking. What if I'm the one who flips out? Then we deserve the fire, he said. But I doubt it. Worked on the clause for weeks. Quietly, nights and weekends. Used a shell firm to house the documents. Routed the activation through a third-party attorney with no formal ties to Blackridge on paper. The clause was written so that if invoked with sufficient documentation, financial misconduct, breached client contracts, or violations of operational protocol, the escrow would override the CEO's voting rights. Temporarily, yes, long enough for the board to install interim control. It wasn't a coup, it was a kill switch. I filed it away, never spoke of it again, not even to Paul after that. When he retired, I almost deleted the contact labeled Clause 14 Trust Counsel. Thought about wiping the archive, burying it forever. Because Austin, for all his fluff and nonsense, didn't seem dangerous. Just incompetent. And incompetence I could mop up. I'd done it before. But now he was dangerous. Not just to morale or culture, but to payroll, to audits, to legal exposure. We were one misstatement away from SEC interest. One more synergy pivot from triggering class action liabilities. And the worst part, he didn't even know. He thought the firm was his sandbox. Thought he could erase structure with charisma. Thought inheritance meant immunity. He didn't know about the clause. He didn't know about the file on the flash drive, the audit logs, the notarized screenshots, the compliance trail I'd been building for the last 60 days. Clean, time-stamped, cross-referenced. He didn't know the founder had left behind a tripwire. And he sure as hell didn't know I had the keys. I didn't want to use it. I wanted him to listen. I wanted him to realize that leading wasn't just posturing. That leadership meant weight, the weight of payroll, of regulation, of reputational risk. I wanted him to see the line and step back from it. But he stepped over it, danced over it, mocked it on company-wide calls. And now the clause was active. The affidavit had been filed. The trust attorney confirmed receipt. The board had been pinged quietly, formally. Not a scandal, not yet. Just a procedural notification, compliance trigger invoked. Clause 14 entered into consideration. Internal review to follow. Austin wouldn't see it coming. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. And when it came, he'd call it betrayal. But really, it was architecture, built by his father, activated by the only adult in the room. The week after I pulled the trigger, the office moved like a storm was building, but no one could name the cloud. It started with calendar changes. Little ones. A director canceled his Friday golf trip. A partner asked for historical P and L tickets he hadn't touched in years. Then the audits began. Not external, not yet. Internal ones. Silent ones. The kind that don't announce themselves with memos or buzzwords. The kind where legal counsel quietly books a small conference room and asks for an hour of your time that turns into 3. They started with finance. Moved to vendor contracts. Cross-checked our billing tiers, then opened our client retention dashboards like they were a puzzle box with a ticking sound. Austin noticed. Of course he did. He misread it as attention, not alarm. On Tuesday, he held a fireside chat on Slack, posted a selfie from his standing desk and said, "So grateful to be building something disruptive with all of you. Lots of exciting conversations happening this week. Let's keep innovating." His hands were shaking in the photo. On Wednesday, HR pinged me. "Hey, quick favor. Could you pull the access logs for Q2? We're just reviewing some protocol stuff." I knew what that meant. We're looking at who signed what, who clicked what, who authorized the Grenshaw disaster, and who tried to stop it. Every signature has a shadow, and they were following mine to find his. I played it cool, gave them everything, even highlighted discrepancies, made it look like cooperation, not design. No dramatic reveals, just data. Because real power doesn't yell, it documents. By Thursday, the atmosphere in the office was clinical, like a waiting room before surgery. People moved quieter. Meetings got shorter. Austin stopped pacing the hallways in his $400 loafers and started working behind closed doors, something he swore he didn't believe in. The glass conference room became his bunker. I passed it once and saw him staring at a whiteboard that just said trust equals transparency in 3 different colors. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. He still didn't know. Know that every review request he got from the board was part of a larger file. That his every response, every casual shrug, every "I'll look into it," every joke about boomer workflows was evidence. A pattern. He tried to cover it with swagger, kept walking into meetings like he was auditioning for a TEDx event, tossed out half-baked strategies and called them experiments, suggested pivoting our client structure toward emotional rapport metrics. His voice cracked when he said it. Even Theo, his barefoot sidekick, started showing up in real shoes. The partners stopped laughing at his jokes, stopped echoing his buzzwords. One even asked during a quarterly pulse check if we had formalized our client renewal roadmap. That's a question you only ask when you've read the emails and seen the gaps. Then Friday morning, it landed. A board-wide calendar invite. No subject. Just one word, review. Meeting was set for Monday, 8:30 a.m. sharp. Emergency sessions are rare. Emergency sessions before lunch, that's not just rare, that's surgical. Austin's name wasn't on the invite. Mine was. That afternoon, I walked past his office. He looked up and gave me a nervous smile, too wide and too fast. "Hey, Legacy Core," he said, trying to sound breezy. "Crazy week, huh? All these reviews. You think the board's doing a realignment push?" I gave him a small shrug. "Could be. Just routine stuff." He nodded too fast. Right. Gotta stay agile." Then, softer, like he thought he was letting me in on something. "Honestly, I think some folks just aren't ready for where we're headed." That was the last thing he said to me before Monday. Not an apology, not a question, not even curiosity. Just a man still clinging to the wheel of a car that was already flipped in the ditch. Thought he was navigating turbulence. He didn't know the runway had been pulled from beneath him, and I was the one holding the checklist. Monday started with an email. Subject: Leadership Transition Notice. No preamble, no branding fluff, no family of professionals garbage. Just a single line, bolded at the top. Effective immediately, Austin Blake is on administrative leave pending investigation. Attached was a brief from the board, signed by every partner except one, and we all knew who that one was. The memo named Gregory Lang, our senior partner from the Chicago office, as interim CEO. Gregory, old school, stone-faced, allergic to hashtags, and someone who once described Austin's leadership style as a combination of caffeine and negligence. The message was clear. The page had turned. The Slack channels went dead. Not a single meme. No reaction gifs. A stunned silence followed by a slow, methodical closing of tabs. One by one, people started creeping out of their offices like survivors after a blast, eyes wide, whispering fragments of questions. Is this real? Did he know? Wait, did you see who sent it? Then came the knock on my door. Board liaison, neutral face. Clipboard, they'd like to see you now. Room 19B, the big boardroom with the view of the skyline. I'd been in it 100 times, never like this. Inside, the temperature was Arctic. Gregory sat at the head of the table, arms folded, lips pursed like someone had just handed him a bad merger. 2 other board members flanked him. Legal counsel sat off to the side, laptop open, fingers still. And across the table, Austin. No designer jacket, no smug grin. Just a pale man in a too-tight button-up, eyes darting like a cornered animal. He didn't even try to speak when I walked in. Took my seat without a word. Gregory nodded at me once. You brought the file? I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a sealed black folder. Thick, heavy, labeled in my own handwriting, Clause 14 activation package. I slid it across the table. Austin flinched like it was radioactive. Gregory opened it page by page. Inside, a full index. Financial discrepancies. Time-stamped emails. Screenshots of unapproved client communications, witness statements from 3 senior staffers, including 2 VPs, an annotated timeline of decisions made without compliance review, and at the top, clipped to the first page with a binder clip so tight it left a dent. Compliance trigger activation letter signature attached, founder Paul Blake. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. Gregory read through the first few pages, nodded slowly, then passed it to legal. She scanned the trigger clause, then gave a single, sharp nod of confirmation. Austin finally found his voice. What the hell is this? He wasn't shouting, not yet, but his voice cracked, the first sign that his throat had dried up. Gregory didn't even look at him. This is a review of the circumstances that led to a compliance activation under Dormant Clause 14. It's fully authorized, per your father's signature and the original governance documents. Austin's face twisted. Clause 14 doesn't mean anything. It was just a placeholder, Dad said. Gregory cut him off cold. Your father left it in effect. He named the trigger, She activated it. That's not interpretation, Austin, that's architecture. Silence. You could hear the fluorescent lights hum. Then Austin turned to me, slow, trembling, and hissed, "You did this." Still, I didn't speak, because this wasn't a conversation anymore. This was delivery. Gregory flipped to the back page, signed a document, then looked to legal. "Can audit protocols. Restrict executive access. Move forward with interim controls." Austin stood, fast, clumsy, knocking over his chair. "You're making a mistake," he barked. "This company needs vision. Not," he pointed at me, finger trembling, voice unhinged, "not her dusty little rules and checklists." I finally looked at him, held his gaze, calm, centered, and said the only thing that needed to be said. "You broke the frame, Austin." The picture collapsed, opened his mouth again, then thought better of it. Because he could feel it now, the tide shifting. The room was no longer his. Hell, it never was. He just didn't see the line until he was already over it. The meeting moved into phase 2, governance review. Legal slid a slim binder to each board member. Inside was everything, the clause, the conditions, the compliance trail. No fluff. No spin. Just reality printed in 12-point Times New Roman with enough footnotes to crush denial flat. Austin didn't sit down, he paced. Or more accurately, he flailed in circles trying to summon authority that no longer existed. "This is a stunt," he spat. "A mutiny. You don't get to strip me of control because some spreadsheet jockey got her feelings hurt." No one responded. He slammed both palms on the table. "You can't do this. This is my company." That's when I finally spoke. Slowly, calmly, like I was explaining physics to a toddler with a blowtorch. "No, Austin, this was your father's company. You were just borrowing it." His eyes narrowed. I let the pause linger. "And you failed the audit." He froze. The board didn't. Gregory looked to the left. "All in favor of executing Clause 14 as outlined in the founding documents?" One by one, hands rose. No hesitation. No eye contact with Austin. Just a silent wave of consequences made flesh. Unanimous. Even the last holdout, George Withers, who'd once called Austin a necessary risk, didn't blink as he raised his hand. Austin stared at them like they'd pulled the sun out of the sky. "You're serious?" Gregory folded his hands. "As of this moment, your voting rights are suspended pending final review. All strategic and operational authority is reassigned to interim leadership. Will retain compensation during the investigation, per clause conditions." Austin's mouth opened, then closed. His hands dropped to his sides. He looked like a child who just found out the tooth fairy was a tax accountant with bad news. He turned to me again, not with fury now, but with a kind of disbelief that made his voice go soft. "You really planned all this?" I shook my head. "No, you did." He didn't have a comeback. Gregory pushed the final form across the table toward me. I signed it, crisp, clean, no hesitation. There it was, transfer complete. Voting control reassigned. Governance stabilized, and Austin sat down, slowly, quietly. For the first time in his career, maybe the first time in his life, he had nothing to say. Because what could he say? That it wasn't fair? That the clause was imaginary? Performance metrics and ignored compliance flags didn't matter because he believed in vibes. This wasn't a coup. This was a conclusion, earned, documented, legalized. He'd misread every room he walked into. He thought charisma could outvote consequence. He thought legacy meant immunity. He thought no one would ever say the quiet part out loud. "You were never the leader, Austin. You were just holding the seat." And now it was gone. I packed my things slowly. No rush, no chaos, just methodical closure. My office didn't have much, really. A few old notebooks, a framed photo of the original team from the Grenshaw onboarding, a plant that somehow survived 2 system outages and 1 winter with no heating. I left the espresso machine. Let someone else enjoy it. Let someone else carry the morning burden for a while. Outside my door, the air had changed. The hallways felt lighter. Someone had cracked a window in a house that had been sealed too long. People spoke in quiet voices again, not whispers of fear, but the low, cautious conversations of those waking up from a long, collective anxiety. HR was updating directory access. Legal was finalizing internal statements, and Austin's name was already removed from the internal org chart, just a blank space where arrogance used to be. I passed his office. Empty. Chair still warm. Whiteboard that once held his vision matrix was wiped clean. Just faint ghosts of words like scale synergy and trust loop that would mean nothing in 10 years. Maybe less. The plant in the corner had wilted. No one had watered it. Classic. My phone buzzed. Unknown Florida number. I already knew who it was. I stepped into the break room, picked up, and said nothing. Hey, Paul said, voice like an old leather glove, worn, familiar, no small talk needed. I heard, and against the counter. Yeah, you did it clean, by the book. He exhaled slowly, knew you would. Got him shame it had to be done. I thought he'd listen to you. He never listened to anyone, not really. He was quiet for a moment. I imagined him sitting in some overpriced Adirondack chair, drink in hand, staring at a canal full of manatees he pretended to care about. I owe you. No, I said. You trusted me. That's more than most ever did. I meant it when I wrote you in. You saved the company, again. I'm getting pressure to bring you back under Gregory. I'm not coming back, Paul. Another pause, this one heavier. You sure? I cleaned the wound. Now let someone else stitch it shut. He didn't argue, just muttered something about owing me dinner if I ever made it south. I hung up before sentiment ruined the moment. Then came the final step. I walked back into the boardroom. It was empty now, the chairs tucked in, coffee cups cleared. Single envelope sat in the center of the table, labeled Severance Release and Final Disengagement Agreement. I sat down, in his chair, the one at the head of the table, the one Austin had spent months trying to fill with posture and decibels and performance, the one Paul used to sit in sideways, legs crossed, scrawling notes with a felt-tip pen while pretending not to care. I opened the envelope, read every line, not because I didn't trust it. Had helped write this template years ago, but because closure deserves attention. Pen in hand, one breath, and just as I was about to sign, the door creaked. Footsteps. I didn't look up. I didn't need to. He didn't say anything, didn't clear his throat, didn't try to spin it. He just stood there, silent, pale, sunken, like someone watching a house they lit burn from the front lawn. And I signed, ink on paper, final authority, final line, final page. Still didn't look at him. Didn't have to, because some endings don't need ceremony, just gravity. As I stood, I slid the pen into my bag, walked past him without a glance. Out the door, down the hall, past the lobby, into the November air that finally felt like it belonged to me. He stood behind me like a question that had no answer. And I left him with one truth, spoken just loud enough to cut. You never saw the cliff, but you ran off it anyway. Appreciate you sticking around, you wise old rebels. Smash that subscribe button, or this fossil might just cause another epic fiasco.